If you're driving a Ferrari, it'll take you less than an hour to zip across this country. But this same tiny nation is so wealthy it could practically hand every citizen a fortune and still have cash to spare. This is Luxembourg, a tiny dot on the map with just over 670,000 people, yet it flaunts the world's highest GDP per capita at over $130,000. Surprisingly, this pint-sized powerhouse isn't exactly swimming in natural resources, so how did Luxembourg become the world's richest country? Luxembourg sits tucked between Belgium to the west, France to the south, and Germany to the east. It doesn't stretch far, roughly 2,586 square kilometers, so if you drove from the northern tip near the town of Clairvaux all the way down to its southern border near the so-called Minette region, you'd only need a couple of hours. Yet, for what Luxembourg lacks in size, it more than makes up for in grandeur. It calls itself a Grand Duchy after all. That's not just a fancy name, it's ruled by a Grand Duke whose powers are mostly formal these days, but hey, you can't deny the sense of spectacle. Luxembourg City, the capital, rests atop dramatic cliffs overlooking deep gorges carved out by the Alzette and Patrice rivers. The place could pass for a medieval fortress, partly because that's precisely what it was for a large chunk of its history. The city's old quarters and fortifications have earned a spot on the UNESCO World Heritage List. So while it may sound hyperbolic to say it's one of Europe's most beautiful capitals, anyone who strolled along the Chemin and La Corniche might agree. The population hovers around 670,000, yet over 40% of these residents were born outside of the country. Walk into a local bakery on a Sunday morning and you might hear a swirl of languages: French, German, Luxembourgish, Portuguese, English. This cultural diversity is not just some random phenomenon. It ties directly into why Luxembourg's economy ranks among the strongest in the world. Of course, living in such a small territory also means forging close cross-border ties. Over 230,000 commuters flow in daily from Belgium, France, and Germany. That helps feed the financial engine while fostering the region's multilingual environment. These daily cross-border workers might complain about traffic congestion near the capital, but they also benefit from Luxembourg's high wages and robust social safety nets. In other words, it's the best of both worlds, if you can handle the morning commute, that is. A journey into Luxembourg's past reveals it wasn't always the thriving financial center that you see today. At one point, it was a farming backwater, rural, isolated, and overshadowed by its bigger neighbors. Between 1715 and 1791, it found itself under Austro-Hungarian rule, largely cut off from commerce because it lacked proper roads linking it to Brussels or other major trade centers. People relied on agriculture and small-scale crafts, with limited prospects for industrial or economic expansion. Change arrived in the late 18th century. Improvements in road infrastructure integrated Luxembourg with its neighbors. The political scene, however, was anything but stable. In 1795, the country became part of revolutionary France, which finally saw the end of feudalism within its borders. Then came the Napoleonic era, followed by the Congress of Vienna in 1815, that handed part of Luxembourg's eastern territory to Prussia, while the rest became the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg under Dutch rule. Confused yet? Luxembourg's territory was essentially the hot potato of Europe for a while. The 1839 Treaty of London whittled Luxembourg down further by ceding a portion to newly independent Belgium. The result of all these border changes was a territory that kept shrinking but retained its distinct identity. Through it all, Luxembourg stayed mostly rural until the second half of the 19th century. That's when the steel industry exploded onto the scene. The southern region, especially around Esch-sur-Alzette and the Minette area, became dotted with furnaces and factories. At one point, Luxembourg was home to one of the biggest steel producers in the world, driving the economy and transforming the country into an industrial force. This steel boom put Luxembourg on the European economic map. ArcelorMittal, which maintains significant roots in Luxembourg, sprang from those 19th and 20th century steel legacies. For decades, steel provided job security, stable economic growth, and a source of national pride. But as markets shifted and steel faced global competition, Luxembourg's leaders realized that they needed more than molten iron to keep the wealth flowing. Enter the pivot to finance, a move so bold some might call it an act of pure strategic brilliance, while others label it a cunning attempt to dodge taxes in broad daylight. Either way, Luxembourg's story was about to get a whole lot more interesting. It's the 1970s. The steel industry is hitting its first real crisis, and Luxembourg stands at a crossroads. The government decides to leverage the country's stable political environment and existing business-friendly frameworks. They effectively open the doors to international banking and embrace an element of confidentiality that makes the place very attractive for the well-heeled. As the old rumor goes, some of the world's biggest private bankers found a cozy second home in Luxembourg. The financial sector soon became a cornerstone of the economy, contributing nearly a quarter of Luxembourg's GDP. Suddenly, a nation once best known for farmland and steel turned into a magnet for financial heavyweights from every corner of the globe. Critics claim the system thrived on secrecy, turning Luxembourg into a kind of quiet safe for those eager to avoid heavy taxation. The country has faced repeated accusations of being a tax haven, forced to tighten regulations or face EU and OECD scrutiny. Despite these headwinds, Luxembourg never retreated from its new financial focus. Instead, it diversified. Private and corporate banking, fund administration, wealth management, and more. By planting itself firmly at the heart of the EU, it became the perfect launchpad for investors keen on assessing the single market of over 400 million consumers. Beyond financial services, this little Grand Duchy also happened to be an ideal headquarters for major European institutions. Luxembourg City hosts the European Court of Justice, the European Investment Bank, and other significant EU administrative bodies. That combination of international political influence, easy access to capital, and an attractive business environment created a golden trifecta that locked in Luxembourg's status as a wealthy powerhouse. The global financial crisis of 2008 didn't take the Grand Duchy down. Sure, growth dipped, like practically everywhere else, but Luxembourg's economy rebounded swiftly. Then came the pandemic in 2020, causing further disruptions. Luxembourg still managed to bounce back faster than most of its European neighbours, hitting over 7% growth in 2021 before economic conditions slowed it down again in 2022 and 2023. Even so, with a per capita GDP soaring above $130,000, few folks in Luxembourg were lining up to complain. Don't be tricked into thinking Luxembourg is content to just lounge around counting money from financial services. In recent years, it has ventured into new frontiers, keen to maintain that top-tier status. One example is the country's deep dive into technology and innovation. The government set up the Luxembourg Cluster Initiative, managed by Lux Innovation, to foster collaboration between research institutions, tech startups, and large corporations. Sectors ranging from automotive to clean tech have their own clusters, pooling resources and knowledge to spark fresh ideas. Then there's the space sector. Yes, Luxembourg is investing in space resources, asteroid mining, satellite technology, the whole cosmic shebang. The country was one of the first in Europe to create a legal framework around resource extraction in outer space. Eccentric? Perhaps, but big moves attract entrepreneurs and investors. A new wave of space-centered startups has arrived, lured in by the chance to shape the future from a small European capital that many folks previously couldn't place on a map. Green finance also emerges as a major theme in Luxembourg's rebranding. The Luxembourg Green Exchange focuses solely on sustainable bonds. That might not be the most adrenaline-fueled corner of finance, but in an era where environmental responsibility sells, it's a shrewd strategic pivot. It goes hand in hand with the country's push towards digitization. Luxembourg has found itself in the top 10 for worldwide digital competitiveness and is working hard to strengthen e-government services, even if it was slow to the party at first. All these developments are supported by a highly educated, multilingual population, one that includes not only residents but also over 230,000 cross-border workers commuting daily from nearby countries. You step off a train in Luxembourg City and you'll notice many people bridging linguistic gaps without blinking. It keeps the environment dynamic. Luxembourg knows that to stay prosperous in uncertain times, it needs to diversify beyond finance. So the push is on towards knowledge-based industries, research, technology, and sustainable solutions. Plenty of outsiders imagine that daily life in Luxembourg must be all fancy suits and quiet boardrooms. On the surface, sure, you'll see more bankers wearing cufflinks than you might spot in a typical European city. The revenue that trickles in through finance means Luxembourg can invest heavily in social services, infrastructure, and education. Social welfare expenditure stands at around 21.9% of GDP, among the highest in the OECD. That's a lot of funding going back to citizens in the form of housing programs, robust healthcare, and quality public education. Part of that strategy is also reflected in the country's approach to integrating foreign residents. Luxembourg once entertained the idea of granting voting rights to non-nationals, a bold move that ultimately didn't happen. Still, immigrants have contributed significantly to shaping society here. The Portuguese community, for instance, is famously vibrant, with its cultural festivals and events. Meanwhile, the old steel towns in the south, Estoril, as a prime example, have begun evolving into cultural hubs. They still carry visible traces of their industrial past, but they're also home to modern art museums, repurposed industrial sites, and new universities. As for natural beauty, meandering through the Mulhotel region, often called Luxembourg's Little Switzerland, is a scenic treat, with hiking trails, rocky formations, and charming villages. Then there's the Ardennes in the north, crowned with medieval castles. The region around Vianden Castle or the medieval fortress of Borchardt might leave you thinking you've stepped into a storybook. This is part of what draws tourists in, the diversity packed into such a small area. You're never more than a short drive from a fortress tower or an ultra-modern skyscraper. Even these seem minor when measured against Luxembourg's overall quality of life. Political stability remains strong. The nation's economy has proven resilient against major shocks. From the steel crisis to financial downturns, the Grand Duchy is consistently showered with AAA ratings from major rating agencies, reflecting confidence that it can weather storms with its well-managed finances and diverse revenue streams. Luxembourg has become a magnet for entrepreneurs, investors, and dreamers of all stripes. Whether you're intrigued by the legendary castles, the cutting-edge finance sector, or the chance to land a job in a country that merges local charm with cosmopolitan flair, Luxembourg remains full of surprises. You might be thinking, alright, I'm ready to pack my bags. Just remember that living in the world's wealthiest country comes with a price. The real estate market might frighten you, but if you can handle the high costs and don't mind hearing half a dozen languages in a single day, Luxembourg could be the place for you. What part of Luxembourg's success story amazed you the most? Let's hear it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.